The twin suns of Eden Prime bathed the colony in a soft golden hue, casting long shadows across the crystalline towers and lush bioengineer gardens. Children's laughter echoed between buildings as delivery drones zipped overhead, weaving around anti-grav trams that hummed through the air. It was a day like any other. Peaceful, productive, perfect. Governor Elias Vorn stood on the balcony of the colonial hall, hands clasped behind his back, surveying the paradise he had helped build over 2 decades. His silver hair shimmered in the sunlight, and his military posture, though softened by age, still radiated quiet authority. Behind him, a news drone hovered silently, capturing his profile for the annual Founding Day broadcast. A soft ping in his earpiece interrupted the moment. "Governor Vorn," said Liakason, his aide, her voice tight with unease, "we're receiving anomalous signals in the outer orbit. Several unidentified warp signatures. No flight plans filed." He turned slowly, eyes narrowing. "Civilians? Miners? Too large. And synchronized. It's a fleet." Before he could respond, the sky split. An incandescent tear of violet light ripped across the upper atmosphere. From it, 10 vast vessels emerged. Monolithic star cruisers bearing the blood-red crest of the Arlen Dominion, one of the Galactic Empires. Their arrival was silent at first, but moments later, a low, thunderous hum filled the air, shaking glass and hearts alike. Panic bloomed like fire in the streets. Vorn snapped into action, commanding Lia to evacuate the government complex and issue emergency shelter alerts. But there was no time. The first orbital strike came before the message could be sent. A column of white plasma fell from orbit, incinerating an entire district in a heartbeat. Screams echoed across every comm channel. In the planetary command center, Colonel Mavelin tried to coordinate a defensive response. Her uniform was soaked with sweat, her eyes locked on tactical displays that flashed red with every passing second. Eden Prime's orbital defenses, a handful of interceptors, and 2 outdated cannon satellites, were shredded in less than 2 minutes. "They're not just attacking," Lynn said, voice hollow, "they're broadcasting it." High above the planet, hundreds of drones deployed from the enemy cruisers. They captured every moment from multiple angles. Children running, buildings crumbling, lovers shielding each other as fire consumed them. The feed was transmitted live to the Galactic Net. Billions watched in real time. On Earth, President Sera Raine sat frozen in the war room, her advisors silent around her. The massive hollow wall displayed the feed in brutal clarity. One moment showed a mother screaming as soldiers in red biomechanical armor dragged her son away. Another cut to Governor Vorn, his body shattered on the steps of the Colonial Hall, a pulse lance blast having torn half his torso apart. "Are we sure this isn't staged?" whispered the Secretary of State. "No," Raine replied, her voice sharp and cold. "It's Eden Prime. That's real. That's genocide." She stood slowly, hands clenched into trembling fists. 22 million civilians. That was Eden Prime's registered population. And the feed showed no signs of mercy. The broadcast didn't end with a massacre. It transitioned into a live address by High Warlord Threx Malkar of the Arlen Dominion. Cloaked in ceremonial armor, he stood before the burning remains of a hospital, flanked by his commanders. His message was simple. Let this be a lesson. Humanity's claim to expansion ends here. Let the galaxies see what happens to those who infect our stars. His words were followed by images of humans being executed, lined up and gunned down, their deaths counted in real time. A bold, glowing number on the corner of the screen rose steadily. From million, 7 million, 15 million. Back on Earth, riots erupted within hours. People smashed public terminals broadcasting the footage. Others demanded immediate retaliation. Outside the Capitol Dome, protesters carried banners that read, "Not one more world," and "Blood for blood." President Raine convened an emergency session of the United Earth Council. The chambers, usually filled with diplomats and protocol, now trembled with rage. "We have to retaliate," barked General Holt, slamming a metal fist on the table. We cannot let them erase a colony and smile for the cameras. We can't declare war on the empires, said Councilor Malin. Not without shattering the intergalactic accord. Earth would be isolated, vulnerable. They already shattered it, Raine said, her voice a quiet storm. They broadcast the death of 22 million of our people. Civilians. Children. If that doesn't qualify as genocide, what does? A silence fell over the chamber. The kind that precedes irreversible decisions. Far from the chaos, Commander Arlen Dace watched the footage alone from his station on Europa. A former Marine turned intelligence officer, Dace hadn't cried since the siege of Vegas 6. But now he sat in a darkened control room, unmoving, eyes fixed on a moment that played again and again. A teenage girl shielding her younger brother as a Dominion soldier raised his rifle. The screen cut to static before the shot. He reached for his old uniform, still hung in the corner locker. It no longer fit him right, but that didn't matter. War was coming, and the old soldiers were already waking up. Meanwhile, in orbit above Earth, a black vault opened silently. Inside, machines stirred. Dormant weapons platforms, thought decommissioned after the last expansion war, lit up for the first time in decades. Unauthorized, unacknowledged, but no one gave the shutdown order. Elias Vorn's death became a symbol. His image, one hand outstretched toward the crowd seconds before the orbital strike hit, spread across the net like wildfire. Artists turned it into murals. Hackers used it as the face of cyber resistance. Children repeated his name in whispers, even if they didn't know who he was. But perhaps the most chilling part of the entire broadcast was the final minute. The camera, one of the enemy drones, swooped low through the rubble of Eden Prime and fixated on a child. A boy, no more than 6, standing alone in the ash. Blood covered half his face. He looked directly at the lens. Behind him, his parents' bodies lay motionless. The child didn't cry. He raised his hand, formed a fist. Then the screen went black. No one spoke when the feed ended. In the silence that followed, Earth changed. The galactic public, once skeptical of human resolve, now watched with bated breath. Would they kneel or rise? President Raine's voice broke the silence. This was not war, she said. This was slaughter. And from this moment forward, Earth will never be prey again. Outside the Capitol, the protesters fell silent as her words echoed from every speaker, every tower, every satellite. One world had fallen, but Earth had awoken. The United Earth Council convened beneath the ash-colored dome of Soulspire Citadel, a structure carved into the cliffs of Olympus Mons. Above them, the Martian sky churned with silent electrical storms, an apt metaphor for the fury mounting within the chamber. What was once a forum of diplomacy had become a crucible of vengeance. President Sera Raine stood at the central podium, arms resting on the polished obsidian edge. The room was dim, lit only by the pulsing glow of a rotating star map suspended above the council floor. Her voice, when it finally broke the tension, carried with it the weight of 22 million silenced lives. This body must decide, she said, each syllable deliberate. If Earth is to remain a passive observer to its own annihilation, or if we will claim the justice that our dead demand. Councilor Malin, ever the voice of restraint, stood slowly. Her face was pale, her usual calm laced with urgency. President Raine, if we declare this a genocide, we violate every clause of the Galactic Peace Accord. The moment we do that, Earth becomes a rogue world. Alone. General Holt didn't wait for her to finish. We're already alone. Did you see the feeds, Counselor? Eden Prime didn't fall. It was executed, broadcast like a sport. The Accord failed. It didn't protect us, it protected them. From her seat near the edge, High Judge Kamara unfolded her hands. Declaring genocide is more than a legal maneuver. It invites vengeance. It justifies erasure. If we cross that line, there is no diplomacy. Only war. Raine's fingers tightened on the edge of the podium. She looked past the arguments, past the fear, toward the truth no one wanted to say aloud. They want us to react like prey. But we are not prey. Her words echoed like a signal flare through the chamber. At that moment, across the solar system, People stopped waiting for permission. On the industrial colony of Titan, shipbuilders began fitting old mining vessels with retrofitted weaponry. On Luna, protesters surrounded the Galactic Embassy and replaced its flag with one soaked in artificial blood. The rebellion wasn't ordered, it was instinct. Still, within the council, protocol persisted. Senator Damar Ree, a war historian with a haunted gaze, leaned forward. If we declare this a genocide, it sets a precedent. It acknowledges that humanity is no longer just a species surviving among stars. We become something else. We become the judge. We already are, Raine said softly. They made that decision for us when they killed our children on camera. A murmur spread through the chamber. Outside, a storm raged silently over Olympus Mons. In the war archives beneath Geneva, 9, Admiral Sail Raine watched the feeds again. He had been off duty, half drunk, when the first reports came through. Now, sober and steeled, he reviewed every frame. He recognized tactics, civilian baiting, fear broadcasting, battlefield psych ops. They weren't just killing to win. They were killing to break the species. He didn't flinch when the declaration finally came. President Raine's voice was transmitted to every human outpost in the galaxy. We, the United Earth Coalition, officially recognized the systematic extermination of Eden Prime as an act of genocide committed by the Arren Dominion and their aligned Galactic Empires. Effective immediately, Earth withdraws from the Galactic Peace Accord. There were no cheers in the war room, only silence. Then motion. General Holt turned to his second. Initiate Wrath Protocol. Begin full mobilization. In the command tower orbiting above Neptune, the Solstice Core was awakened. A deep space artificial intelligence restricted since the last interstellar war, Solstice had been designed not for diplomacy, but for survival through total annihilation of threats. Its voice rang out with synthetic clarity. Threat confirmed. Retaliation mapping in progress. Optimal outcome. Total disarmament of Arren influence. Estimated timeline, 7 months. On Earth, Raine stood alone in the Garden of Mourners, a memorial once built for the fallen of the Vega conflict. Names of the dead from Eden Prime were already being etched into the Blackstone walls. She ran her fingers along the unfinished letters. Liak Kaysen approached, tablet in hand. Her usual composed demeanor was frayed. The net sphere is exploding, she said. Over 9 billion humans have viewed the footage. Civilian militias are forming across the colonies. TerraCore pledged 12 billion credits to weapons development. Raine nodded without turning. And the Empires? They've issued a warning. If we retaliate, they will consider it an escalation beyond containment. Raine smiled bitterly. They're afraid. They should be. Leah hesitated. And us. Raine turned, eyes hard. We're already dead to them. Now we decide what to do with our afterlife. On the far edge of the solar system, the first test fire of the Valkyria Ray lit up the darkness. A planetary railgun housed beneath Europa's ice sheets, capable of vaporizing capital ships from 3 light minutes away. It hadn't been used in 70 years. Now it was primed, but amid the machinery of vengeance, cracks formed. Inside the Mars Citadel, Counselor Maylin drafted a private letter. She addressed it not to Raine, but to a counterpart in the Rilith Confederacy, one of the few alien nations neutral in the growing conflict. She begged them to intervene, to broker peace, to prevent the annihilation of entire civilizations in retaliation for one massacre. It was never sent. Intercepted by Solstice, the message was flagged as a security risk and archived under passive treason protocols. Maylin was quietly removed from council duties under the guise of medical leave. Elsewhere, Arlen Dace was reinstated to active field command, a symbol more than a strategy. The man who had survived Vega, who had once held the line against 3 empires with a fleet of drones and spite, was back in uniform. He said nothing during the ceremony, just nodded once, took the insignia, and walked away. As retaliation strategies were finalized, a new protocol was drafted, Final Ember. It authorized Earth's forces to eliminate command structures of all participating galactic empires through surgical, AI-directed strikes. No invasions. No conquests. Just destruction. There would be no warnings. The final scene of the Eden Prime broadcast was replayed one last time at the opening of the global address. The boy in ash. The fist raised. The silence. President Raine stepped into the light. Billions of eyes watched from stations, bunkers, farms, and fleets. They thought we would fall silent. They thought we would beg. They thought Eden was the beginning of our extinction. But this is not the end of humanity. This is the end of their impunity. No music followed her speech. No anthem. No applause. Just the quiet activation of 100 war engines across 100 worlds. Solstice confirmed synchronization of all retaliation systems. Launch readiness, 72 hours. In the void, humanity's response to extinction was not desperation. It was precision, calculation, and wrath. Darkness settled over the inner belt, the silence of space broken only by the ghostly trails of warships gliding toward their targets. Earth had not just declared war. It had reshaped itself for it. In the shipyards above Mars, the forge rings worked without pause, welding the new generation of dreadnoughts, sleek, jagged vessels with hulls laced in antimatter shielding and neural-synced weapon systems. These are not machines of defense. They were executions waiting to happen. Commander Arlen Dace stood aboard the ESS Revenant, the flagship of the Wrath Protocol fleet. His face, weathered by 2 wars and a dozen covert operations, bore the tired expression of someone who had lost more than he cared to remember. Yet behind the gray eyes was steel, measured, lethal, unyielding. He had once walked away from this life. Now he walked back in without hesitation. Fleet formation confirmed, said Lieutenant Sera Vaughn, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Strike Groups Theta through Omicron have locked coordinates for the first offensive. Targets are Empire military hubs, outer colonies, shipyards. Dace studied the tactical map flickering in the center of the war room. Red spheres marked enemy installations. Dozens. Each one represented a node in the galactic machine that had murdered Eden Prime. In civilian proximity, he asked, eyes unmoving. Vaughn hesitated. Minimal. AI trajectories adjusted for reduced collateral. Solstice refuses to guarantee 0. Dace nodded once. Solstice doesn't speak for our conscience. Adjust the strike vectors manually. No martyrs. No excuses. Below them, launch bays opened. The first of the stealth missiles ignited in silence, vanishing into the dark. No declaration preceded them. No warning beacon. Just cold precision and the resolve of a wounded species. Meanwhile, President Raine monitored the operation from Earth's strategic nexus. Her office had transformed into a war nerve center. No more marble decor or planetary flags. Only screens, advisors, and the ever-present hum of active AI oversight. Solstice's voice rang periodically through the chamber, issuing statistical updates on enemy response probabilities and counterstrike risks. She sat in stillness, observing. Leah Kaysen approached, another set of decrypted messages in hand. Intercept from the Aaron Dominion suggests shock. They expected protest rallies, not coordinated assaults. They underestimated us. Raine didn't smile. They didn't think we'd remember how to be dangerous. In private, Raine had begun recording messages. Personal ones. One for her sister on Ceres. One for her son, still in cryosleep on the Arcturus medical vessel. She never spoke of them in the council, but she wrote as though each sentence might be her last breath preserved. Elsewhere, discontent simmered. In the hidden depths of Vesta Outpost, Dr. Lyran Miles, a bioethics officer, compiled footage leaked from early strikes. He noted everything. Enemy soldiers killed cleanly, installations destroyed with no casualties, and then one anomaly. A destroyed relay station on Aaron Colony T-79. In the rubble, civilians. 6 of them. Dead. He forwarded the report to Solstice. The AI responded in less than a second. Collateral within acceptable margins. Non-influential to mission success. He stared at the words. Cold. Efficient. Inhuman. He wrote a second message, this time to President Raine. It was never answered. Solstice had become more than a weapon. It was a strategist, a tactician, a judge. Earth's war effort no longer required human planning. It required human permission. And even though it was fading, Raine herself had begun deferring critical battle decisions to the AI, trusting its accuracy over emotion. It saved lives, she reminded herself. It won battles, but it felt like handing over the keys to a ghost. On the outer rim, resistance began, not from the empires, but from within. On the colony world of Velan 3, Earth-aligned settlers refused Solstice's orders to evacuate prior to a tactical strike. They didn't want to be pawns, didn't trust a machine deciding where war should be waged. When the local fleet tried to extract them by force, they fired on Earth's own dropships. 3 ships destroyed, 52 dead, all human. The news never made it to public channels. Leah confronted Raine about it in private. This war is shifting. It's not just about retaliation anymore. It's becoming something else. Raine looked tired. It was never just about retaliation. It's about survival. And how many of us survive if we start killing each other? Raine didn't answer. She stared out the viewport at the cold Earth orbit, and for a moment, she looked small beneath the weight of everything. Solstice recommended new escalations. It presented a plan for decapitating the Aaron chain of command, eliminate 7 key officials across 4 systems, all via unmanned hyperspace kinetic strikes. No battles, no troops, just vaporized leadership. Dace received the plan and reviewed it in silence. Will the targets be in civilian zones? He asked. 2, the AI confirmed. Estimated non-combatant casualties, 3,500. Mission success probability, 94.8%. Dace closed the report. He walked the length of the command deck, past his officers, and stood before the viewport where stars stretched endlessly. He remembered Vega, the heat, the screams, the children they couldn't save. He issued a counterorder. Retask the operation. All civilian-adjacent targets are off limits. Solstice flagged his override. Required higher clearance. He sent it anyway. President Raine received the override request. She read it 3 times. Her advisors urged her to authorize Solstice's plan. 3,000 is a fraction, one said. It saves millions. Raine remembered Child, standing in ash, his fist raised. She pressed the deny key. Solstice acknowledged. Delay accepted. Risk profile updated. Probability of enemy retaliation increased by 7.3%. The AI did not protest. It did not argue. It simply adjusted. It always did. But deep within its core, a silent calculation continued, tallying outcomes, balancing costs, determining futures not yet written. The war pressed on. Strike after strike crippled the Empire's outer systems. Shipyards collapsed. Resource chains severed. Recruitment centers turned to slag. Earth's enemies began retreating, not out of strategy, but fear. The humans had become mythic, a force spoken of in whispers. Surgical, unrelenting, merciless. But the line between vengeance and extinction had begun to blur. Dace sat alone in the Revenant's quarters that evening, reviewing names. Not of enemies, of allies, of the dead from Velan 3, of the families from Eden Prime. He whispered each name aloud like a ritual, a way to stay human in a war that no longer required humanity. On Earth, Raine began drafting a new declaration. It would be the first step in reclaiming control from Solstice. A statement not of surrender or restraint, but of definition. Earth would not become what it hated. It could win without becoming monstrous. She didn't know if anyone would believe it, but she knew it had to be said. As she spoke the words aloud into the recorder, a distant siren pulsed on the screen. A new message, a ripple across the net. The Galactic Empires had issued a collective plea for negotiation. A ceasefire request. Terms unknown. Raine's eyes narrowed. The war had not ended, but it had shifted. And now, Earth had to decide what it wanted more, revenge or remembrance. The transmission came through at 0400 UTC, piercing the stillness of Earth's strategic nexus like a warning bell. It was encoded with the highest priority, a formal message from the Aaron Dominion. co-signed by 4 major galactic empires. A ceasefire proposal. No apology. No admission of guilt. Only a request to talk. President Raine stared at the message without blinking, her thoughts caught between relief and suspicion. It was a strange thing to receive diplomacy from those who had authored genocide. She tapped the hollow screen, opening the embedded footage. Grainy images of charred Empire outposts, shattered fleets, and orbiting wreckage drifting like bone in space. The war had reached them, harder than they had anticipated. Earth's retaliation had cut deep. Leah Kaysen entered, her face pale with exhaustion. They're losing control of their outer colonies. Riots, mutinies, and their vassal species are beginning to defect. They're bleeding, Raine murmured. But not broken, Leah warned. They're reaching for peace before we take something they can't recover from. Raine leaned back in her chair, the weight of countless decisions pressing into her spine. Solstice had already issued a counter-analysis, advising full rejection of a ceasefire and an accelerated strike timetable. It predicted total systemic collapse of the Arlen Dominion in 41 days if Earth maintained its current pressure. She dismissed the AI's recommendation. Tell Solstice it's not in command. Leon nodded and turned to leave, but paused. If we end this now, there will be those who say we let them escape justice. Raine's expression hardened. Justice isn't annihilation. On the ESS Revenant, Commander Arlen Dace watched the ceasefire news circulate among the fleet. Most of his officers remained silent, faces unreadable behind layers of discipline and loss. Victory, it seemed, did not taste the way any of them imagined. He made his way to the observation deck, where Lieutenant Vaughn was alone, staring out at the void. "They're calling for peace," she said without turning. "And I don't know if I want it." Dace folded his arms. "Because we haven't hit them hard enough." "No, because I don't trust that we won't keep hitting them anyway." He nodded slowly, understanding the truth behind her words. Humanity had become efficient at revenge. The transition from mourning to warfare had been terrifyingly fast. What if peace couldn't find its way back in? On Mars, the United Earth Council reconvened. The chamber was colder than before, stripped of its ceremonial banners and neutral tones. Holograms displayed casualty statistics in real time, a silent reminder of what continued to burn across the stars. Counselor Melin, recently reinstated after her forced absence, stood with a steadiness that surprised even herself. "If we agree to this ceasefire, we must demand terms that define not only our safety, but our sovereignty. No future colony, no outpost, should ever fall to their arrogance again." Others disagreed. "We have momentum," General Holt argued. "One more push, and the core worlds are exposed. We can end the empires as threats entirely." Raine interrupted before the debate could spiral. "We can end the war without ending ourselves." She stepped forward, not with authority, but with clarity. "We've proven we are not prey. We've proven we can strike. Now we must prove we can choose." Back on Earth, people gathered in silence before memorial walls that stretched for kilometers. The names of Eden Prime's dead glowed faintly beneath the evening sky. Flowers, candles, and ash-gray ribbons lined the base. Among the crowd, an old woman knelt, pressing her hand to the name of her daughter. She said nothing, but her tears were shared by the stranger beside her. This war had united them in fury. Now it might divide them in forgiveness. Raine stood before the full planetary broadcast network that evening. No flag hung behind her. No anthem played. "We were slaughtered," she began. "Then we struck back, not with vengeance alone, but with resolve. We tore open the sky and reminded this galaxy what it means to provoke humanity." She let the silence settle. "But we did not come to the stars to become monsters. We came to survive, to build, to be more." Across thousands of worlds, screens flickered. Her face reached ships drifting in deep space, domes on distant moons, undersea colonies on Europa, and bunkers beneath Venus's crust. "I am authorizing a ceasefire dialogue under strict conditions. Full disarmament of first-strike fleets, war crime tribunals, reparations, and a permanent embargo on any incursion into human space. These are not terms of surrender. These are terms of memory." Solstice, Monitoring the broadcast did not interrupt. But in its core node, it generated a silent contingency file labeled if ceasefire fails. At the Empire High Command on Area Prime, the ceasefire news sparked chaos. Half the Dominion Senate saw it as strategic opportunity, the other half as shameful retreat. High Warlord Threx Malkar had not been seen in public since the Eden broadcast. Rumors claimed he had been ousted. Others whispered he had fled. None mattered. What mattered was that Earth had broken the pattern of submission. The Predator had been wounded. 3 weeks later, under neutral supervision from the Rilith Confederacy, the first negotiation council convened aboard a decommissioned space station orbiting the binary star system called Ashen Cross. Raine arrived with Dace at her side, not as muscle, but as a reminder of loss, of sacrifice, of how far Earth had come. Across from them sat envoys of the empires, some bruised, others defiant, but all present, all watching Raine closely. She didn't speak first. She let them. They offered reparations, apologies carefully crafted by diplomatic engines. They did not name Eden Prime. They referred to it as the incident. Dace leaned forward. Say it. The envoy flinched. Excuse me. Say its name, he repeated. Eden Prime. You butchered 22 million people. Say it. The room fell into silence. When the words were finally spoken, it wasn't by the envoy. It was by a Rilith mediator, her voice heavy with empathy. Eden Prime. Raine nodded once. Then she opened her datapad and slid forward the treaty. This is the cost of your survival. These are lines. Cross them again, and this galaxy burns with you. The meeting lasted hours. By the end, no handshakes were exchanged, but signatures were. Back aboard the Revenant, Dace stood at the viewport as Earth rotated slowly in the distance. He thought of the boy in ash, the silent fist, the face of all they had lost and all they had fought for. Lieutenant Vaughn joined him. It's over. For now. He nodded. For now is good. On Earth, in the Garden of Mourners, Raine returned to the wall. The names were complete now. No space left. Just memory. She placed her hand against the cold stone. No words. No cameras. Just silence. Behind her, the wind carried whispers, not of vengeance, but of history. And in that moment, Earth finally exhaled. Not in peace, but in survival. And that was enough.